So thanks for joining me for a Friday morning, actually, CI/CD session. Today I'm going to talk about a GitHub Actions workflow that adapts to the host you're deploying it to. We've recently released it to the community under the name Chameleon CI, a one-size-fits-most GitHub Actions workflow for deploying Drupal sites to any host without maintaining separate YAML files. Plus, there's a lizard involved. So who am I? I'm Bob McDonald, and I'm here with the Recording Initiative. So let me just double check that I've got the button pressed. Last year, I was the only one who didn't press it at Pacific Northwest Drupal Summit, which was kind of embarrassing. I'm also the Drupal practice lead at Kalamuna. I'm based out of British Columbia, Canada now, but before that I worked on the web for 2 decades in Japan. And when I'm not stuck in a YAML rabbit hole, I'm usually making sawdust in my wood shop or designing and printing 3D models. They seem to require a lot less iteration for me than a CI script to get working right.
Sounds legit.
I'm UltraBob on Drupal.org and Drupal Slack, where you may have seen this avatar that my wife drew of me. So I asked ChatGPT to draw me a new one based on that avatar. And it gave me this cool combination hat bandana combo. So I thought about getting a ribbon to stick to the side of the hat so people would recognize me, but I thought maybe that's too much. So what are you going to get out of this talk? Why is it valuable to have an adaptive CI set up for your Drupal site? I'll introduce that through the kind of pain points that inspired Chameleon CI. Say you've got multiple Drupal sites. The more you have, the more beneficial this will probably be for you. Some of your sites are on Pantheon, maybe some on Acquia, maybe Platform.sh for that project with more specific requirements. Maybe you've got something off somewhere else. Each host has its own quirks. Pantheon uses web as its document root, has integrated composer, and features multi-dev environments for development branches. Whereas Acquia prefers the doc root directory and expects you to build the assets yourself before you get it to Acquia. Platform.sh, I guess it's Upsun now. And by the way, I think I'll call it Platform throughout the rest of this talk, and I haven't updated the script yet to deal with Upsun, but that's coming soon. Anyway, you can do pretty much anything on Platform with some adjustments of the YAML files, but we start out with what comes out of the box, which is Composer available on the host, but not Node available there. It isn't necessarily hard to set up a robust Actions workflow to support each site, but keeping track of the differences between them and making sure they all work in an understandable and predictable way gets really hard really fast. Several sites on several hosts quickly becomes a maintenance nightmare. Next thing you know, you have several almost the same workflows for each host that drift apart when you're not looking. So what if instead of several similar copies of 3 separate workflows, we had one smart one? One that detects your hosts on the fly, knows if you should run Composer or Node builds or skip them as part of your actions, knows whether your document root is web or doc root, can automatically build Pantheon multidevs as needed and clean them up when you merge. One pipeline to rule them all. That's what Chameleon CI is. And in a few slides, we'll look at a demo of it in action. But first, let's look at the important components. Chameleon CI.yaml is the brains of the operation. The workflow itself, it handles detection, builds, deploys, branch logic, multi-devs, all of it. And you may not need git ignore deploy unless you're doing builds in GitHub, but it's not your dev git ignore, it's your CI git ignore that swaps in only if you're generating artifacts that are normally git ignored. And then there's, that makes sure that the built files like your vendor directory or your theme assets don't get ignored when you're pushing to your host. And install.sh is where you'll start. The install script is the valet. It sets up your repo fast, makes the workflows folder, downloads the workflow, asks if you'll build assets in CI, and it gives you the next steps. Small, clear pieces with one job each. And like any good deploy pipeline, Chameleon CI does need some secrets and variables to work its magic. The required ones are the deploy repo, which is the URL for your Git repo on the host. your SSH key and SSH config so GitHub can push, a git name and git email so the commit logs can be attributed to your deploy bot. And then for Pantheon, you need to add the Pantheon site name and the Pantheon machine token so we can run terminus commands and deal with multidevs. All of these go into your GitHub repos, actions, secrets, and variables. So I just want to break down really quickly before the demo how everything works so that when you see it in the demo, it'll make a little bit more sense. So behind the scenes, we first do host auto detection. We look at the deploy repo, we look at the URL, and if it's got drush.in in the repo name, we know it's Pantheon. If it's got Acquia in the name, we know it's Acquia. If it's got platform, we know it's platform, and I'm assuming it's going to be at upsun.com now that it's upsun. Yeah, so I need to get Upsun to provide me a sandbox so I can adjust the detection for that and make sure it all still works. But for the rest of the talk, I'll call them platform because I haven't updated yet for their new identity as Upsun. The next step is to set host defaults and apply any overrides. So we have a set of default steps that we run for each host, and then you can override them. On Pantheon, we skip action side, composer, and node builds by default. To get that to work, you need to include the Pantheon SE node composer package so you can get node on the host, but then you can build both composer and the theme host side. Acquia doesn't provide any host side build options. They expect fully built artifacts, so we do all the build steps on GitHub Actions. And then platform, the default that we've set up is just to build composer on the host, and do any node steps in Actions. But like I say, you can do overrides, and those will carry more than the default things do. And then we do the action side build steps. So if your host is configured to run composer or node build steps in Actions, those steps are run. You'll have to add your particular node build commands because we can't know what they are in advance. But we default to npm run build. If you do any action side build steps, we do the git ignore shuffle to make sure your build artifacts get pushed. And then the next step is a doc root switch. We assume the repo uses web, which seems to be the modern default for Drupal. We use web for Pantheon and Platform.sh, but since Acquia uses doc root, we actually move the directory in the action so that you can just keep all of your project set up the same way, and it'll handle it on the fly. On Pantheon, we support multi-devs. I was just talking to James from Tugboat about that we could bring Tugboat in to kind of support the same thing for other hosts. So that's on the to-do list. A pull request targeting the primary branch auto-creates a multi-dev and adds the live link to your PR description. And when you merge, it nukes the multi-dev and the branch for you, and there's no room. If there's no room for a new multi-dev, you'll get a comment in the pull request telling you that you don't have any more room yet left, so you don't know why, or you don't have any mystery as to why you didn't get a multi-dev. And this results in one standardized workflow that adapts to the environment you're deploying to. Now, those of you who keep up with Pantheon development might be aware that Pantheon is currently beta testing their own GitHub Actions integrations. They offer a GitHub app for new sites and GitHub Action for existing sites that allow pushing to Pantheon from GitHub Actions and include multi-dev support. Chameleon CI's primary purpose is to support your setup no matter what host you're deploying to, but if there's a solid Pantheon deployment action available, it would make sense to integrate that instead of maintain our own. I do have access to the beta, but I haven't had time to test it yet. So everything I'm saying here is based on reading the docs, and maybe Chris can correct me on some things. But for the moment, I think our version lines up better with what we want it to do. We want our multi-devs named after our branches because they're named after our ticket numbers at Kalamun anyway. And the Pantheon action appears like it names them after the pull request number, which is generated by GitHub, and that's not something we control. Our setup checks to make sure there's room for a new multi-dev before it tries to create one, and notifies you in a comment on the PR if there's no space. We add a link to the multi-dev in the PR's description once the multi-dev's created. And finally, we clean up the multi-dev once the PR is closed or merged. Pantheon's action can do that, but as far as I can tell, it doesn't do it by default. And we also clean up the branch, even if there's not a multi-dev there. If there's a branch on the Pantheon repo, we clean that up too, because I've run into performance issues for Pantheon sites that have really big repos. As Pantheon's action grows and matures, we'll probably end up integrating that. But for now, I think this version just has a few advantages for us. Enough about Pantheon. Let's talk about those unique hosts. Maybe you're self-hosting or deploying to something obscure. No problem. There's a define override step right in the YAML file. You can force the host type. You can set up what the doc root is, toggle composer and node manually, define the primary branch on the host repo. Override means you're not stuck if your setup's edge case central. Okay, enough slides. Let's see it in action. I'll try and line up with the videos here. So we're looking at the README on the Chameleon CI GitHub page, and right near the top we find the command we'll need to install it. Before that, let me highlight the warning right below that. The first time Chameleon CI pushes to the host repo, it needs to make sure that it doesn't run into any errors due to unrelated code being on the repo. So it performs a force push, then creates a flag file to let itself know that it doesn't need to force push anymore. It's just important that you know that the first time you deploy with Chameleon, whatever's on your host repo will get overwritten with what's on GitHub. There's a lot of detail in the README, but I just want to highlight that there are detailed descriptions down below on all of the variables and secrets you'll need to add to your repository to enable Chameleon CI to do its magic. That includes an example SSH config that you could use on Pantheon Platform or Acquia site to enable deploys. It's even got a little setting in there to make sure that your action doesn't time out when the connection gets long while it's building the multi-dev, so that you can make sure you get back when the multi-dev successfully creates, so you can get the URL and put it on the pull request. So now, just to explain all the windows you'll be seeing during the demo, here's a local copy of a new DDEV-based Drupal project called Chameleon CI. Back over in the browser in another tab, we have the repo for the project on GitHub. There's no GitHub Actions config associated with the repo as we see it here. One more tab up, you see the local version of the site being served by DDEV, and you can see the site name is Chameleon Test. The next tab is the Pantheon site dashboard for our new test site. Nothing has been committed to it yet. And finally, we can see the Chameleon test site hosted by Pantheon. Obviously, since we haven't pushed anything to it, we're getting a no site detected error at this point. So back over at the Chameleon CI README, we'll copy the install command and run it in our local project. Maybe. So first it repeats the warning about an initial force push, and then it downloads the workflow file, asks if you need to build anything in GitHub Actions, and gives some examples for the supported hosts. If you do need to build on GitHub Actions, it will also install git ignore deploy. But since we're deploying to Pantheon, we'll select no here. Now it lets us know what variables and secrets we need to set up on our GitHub Action repository and gives us a link to the relevant section of the README. Since we're on Pantheon, we'll end up needing 5 variables and 2 secrets. So we'll go over to the test repo and navigate to settings, secrets and variables, actions, and then we'll click on the variables tab so we can add the variables first. We click on the new repository variable and enter deploy repo in the name field. And I'll run a terminus command to get the repo URL from the site and copy that value in. And then I'll make sure to take out that carriage return at the end that cost me so much time when I was recording this demo trying to figure out what's going wrong. Now we'll add the remaining variables at high speed. We have the git name, the Git email. And as I mentioned earlier, there's an example SSH config in the README that will work just fine for this, so we'll copy that and paste it in as the SSH config variable. And then finally, we need the Pantheon site machine name as the Pantheon site name variable. And that's all 5 variables that we needed. So now we'll jump over to the secrets tab and add our 2 secrets. The first is the SSH key. I've got another command prep to copy that into the clipboard. And I'm not all that well prepared for the presentation today, but I did manage to hide that secret, so that's good. And the next thing we'll need is the Pantheon machine token, and I'll try not to show that one either. So now we have our 2 secrets and 5 variables. We should be ready to push our new workflow to the repo. Git status shows that we have something in the GitHub directory. So doing a quick preview will show you that there's some YAML there. We'll add it to we'll add that directory and confirm that it's ready to be committed. Get it committed and push it up. Assume I can probably fast forward that part. So back over at the test repo, if we load the Actions tab, we'll see an Actions underway. So let's check that out. The host detection and configuration happened quite quickly. And then we set up PHP, and we try to detect what version of PHP you have based on your composer file. And if we can't, we use a sensible default. Once that's in place, we install Terminus, since this is a Pantheon site. Terminus then makes sure the site's in Git mode before trying to push anything to the Git repo. I think Pantheon sites start out in SFTP mode, so that step usually takes a little more time to run the first time. After that, we get ready to push to the remote. And since this is the first push, we do a force push, then create the flag file and do another push both to Pantheon and to GitHub so that they both have that same history. So there's that second commit of the flag file. That workflow's done, so we go back over to our local repo and pull to bring that new file in. And then we need to wait for Pantheon to finish building. So we'll get a command ready to push our local database to Pantheon and save some time in making sure that the site UUIDs and things like that are the same. Once Pantheon's finished, if we have a look at the log, we can confirm that a composer build happened. And if we had added our standard script for building the theme at the end of the composer build, we'd see that running here too. So now we'll actually do the database push. We normally comment that command out in the Pantheon provider file in DDEV because it's kind of a dangerous command. But for initializing a new website, it's perfect. And now that that push is finished, if we have another look at the Pantheon site, we'll see that it now has the right site name on it. Now, to quickly demo the Multidevs functionality, I'll create a new branch called Multidevs. I'll run a drush command to give the site a new name. And then the local test site will show that new name. So we'll go ahead and export that configuration. Now we'll push that new branch up to GitHub. I wish I had typed a little faster when I was recording this. Okay, so back over on the test site repo, if we go to the pull request tab, we'll see that we have a branch with recent changes. We look at the actions tab, we'll see that just pushing to the branch hasn't triggered any action. But if we create a new pull request targeting main, actions comes alive. So we do the host detection and configuration, set up PHP. Make sure we're in Git mode, and then we push the new branch to the Pantheon repo. You can see that we next check for how many, okay, I'm ahead of it. Push to the multidev branch. We next check to see how many multidevs there are available, and then if we have space for it, we create the multidev. If there wasn't space, we leave a comment on the pull request. We'll fast forward the multi-dev creation process because that takes a long time. Next, we add the multi-dev link to the pull request description, and we're done. So we'll go over and verify that the pull request has that link on it. And since the multi-dev build is done, we'll import the configuration. Obviously, if you had a Quicksilver step set up there to do that, you wouldn't need that step. If we go over to the dashboard and navigate to the multi-dev site, we'll see that we have a multi-dev and that multi-dev has that new site name on it. So finally, if we go back over to the pull request and merge it, we'll see that it kicks off two actions. One to deploy to main and the other one for closing out the PR. So looking at the one for closing the PR, since we've already looked at an example of that other one, we'll see that it'll skip all the deploy steps and instead just move on to deleting any multi-dev or branch associated with the pull request from Pantheon. You can see that the merge took 26 seconds and the deletion of the multi-dev took 49 seconds. Those ran in parallel, so it's about a minute to have that finish up. If we fast forward the build on multi-dev and import the config on dev, we'll see that the dev site now has the new site name. And this would all work very similarly on Acquia or Pantheon, minus the multi-dev workflows. So that's where I think if I can add Tugboat into this for people that have that, that'll make it pretty easy. Yeah?
On Acquia, you can also add CD profile.
Oh, you can? On pretty, okay.
Yeah, I've done it with BLT, but I haven't done it with pipelines, or GitHub Actions. So it should be possible.
Okay. Thanks for that. I'll probably reach out to you to learn a little bit more about if you've got that in your pipeline, how you're doing it.
Yeah, sure.
Thanks. Okay, so I'm using this with real projects now, and I've been using a less polished predecessor at Kalamuna for some time. We currently recognize and have default settings for 3 hosts, and I hope to figure out a good setup for Amazy soon. Amazy is a little bit trickier because they start out using GitHub, so I'm trying to figure out how we can integrate it in a way that will still make the other ones easy and add some benefit if you have an Amazy setup. Maybe if you already have an Amazy project and you have good ideas, you can help me out with a pull request. I'm also looking for ways we can make all of the host support more convenient, like Tugboat, maybe potentially adding a Diffie config in if you've got a Diffie account so that you can do that stuff. I'm also looking for a way to build that multi-dev feature in, like you mentioned, Acquia might have that capability. So if you have any ideas, please do let me know or put in a pull request.
It just costs like 5 times more than anything you pay for. Just because it's an add-on.
Okay. All right. So it's. I've also got a pull request in process to separate out the smarts of the workflow, so we can run automated tests against all of it and make sure that it keeps working as expected. And finally, I'm looking into whether we might be able to make it even easier to use if we released it as an action instead of the way it's set up now. So that may be coming down the road. You can grab Chameleon CI today. Here's a QR code and the address for that repo. I'll leave that up for a bit so you can scan it if you want it. It's open source, so fork it, break it, send a PR. If your host does something weird and this can't handle it yet, open an issue and help me make it better. Oops. All right, so let's open it up. You can ask me about weird edge cases, how to adapt this for custom hosts, any gotchas you're worried about, or just tell me your worst CI/CD fail. We've all been there. Yeah, any questions?
Yes, I want you to use push to Pantheon. And we can go into the specifics after. I don't want to hijack your Q&A.
All right.
Well, that's funny because I would actually say the opposite.
I think push to Pantheon can be a component of this.
As an option.
Yeah, like if it detects Pantheon, then I think rather than doing all of the custom Chameleon CI stuff, it just uses push to Pantheon and making sure that push to Pantheon supports all the stuff that you're doing, and then it's just one of the actions in the chain.
I can see it. The only reason why I mentioned this is because I've been doing that exact process, but just with a Circle CI Pantheon deployment with City of Portland for like 7-8 years now, using the Pantheon build tools, and it's kind of flawless, and we get so much better like output from the Circle CI scripts, similar to GitHub Actions scripts that you're looking at, than we did with the just push, because it was kind of like a black box to do the push versus we could.
Well, push to Pantheon specifically is action. Is the action you mentioned? Yeah.
All right, thanks. Any other questions?
How about to just plain vanilla, like droplet, or you just a line stack, nothing.
Oh, you mean as a host?
As a host, yeah.
I think it would work in the same way if you're managing that with a repo on the host that you're pushing to. You would just need to set it up with all of the overrides because it wouldn't be able to detect a host by default. So you just, in the override section, which is right at the top of the YAML file, you would say, I want my composer build to happen on the host, or I want it to happen in actions. I want node on the host or on actions, and then it can handle that. But yeah, if you've got that use case, please try it out and let me know if you run into any problems with it, and let's figure out how to make it better.
I'm doing everything manually now, so I got to give you some kind of pipeline.
Great, yeah. Please try it out and reach out. I'd be happy to help if you run into trouble with it. Any other questions? All right. Well, thanks so much for spending your time with me and my lizard. I'm Bob McDonald, bob@columnar.com, Ultra Bob on Drupal Slack, and I'm happy to answer any questions later too. Happy deploying.